Hi, I'm Larry Richardson with Sea Level Rise Real Estate. Now, normally this time of year, I'd be posting videos of me trudging through sea level rise floodwaters around South Florida. This is typically what we get. But this year, I did something different. After I got my second COVID shot in April, I decided it was time to take a nice long trip across America for two reasons. One was to see what's actually happening out there with climate change with my own eyes, and two was to produce videos for my step-by-step chef series, which is all about cooking at home the step-by-step way. Here I am preparing preparing a little bit of French toast on the 4th of July out in the Nevada desert. I mean, that's just the way I hang. But the other thing I was doing was much more serious as I was canvassing the nation. I basically took a trip from the first week of June until mid-August, and I have to be honest with you, it has taken me this long to post this video because, quite frankly, what I saw was it was shocking and it was sad. It was shocking because I've been camping out in the West, in fact in the East too, for a couple of decades. And I've seen what the country looked like before this climate change really locked in, and it is locking in. And it was sad because, you know, I want to live on this planet just like you do, and I want future generations and wildlife to be able to share the joys of this planet too. And what I saw was not encouraging. Now, my trip started in Florida. I went up to, pretty much up the middle of Florida, up into the mountains, up into the Appalachians in Georgia. Now, up there, I didn't see a lot, to worry about in terms of climate change, but also I wasn't there when Tennessee had flooding rains that tragically killed people out of nowhere. And I didn't see when some of the tropical storms and hurricanes, the leftovers, went up the Appalachians and flooded other communities with the same tragic results. I also certainly was not on the Louisiana coastline when they got flooded and just demolished, especially southwest of New Orleans by Hurricane Ida. And that's just horrible. And these are unprecedented storms. Now, this is what I didn't see. So I went up the Appalachians, I went into the Great Smoky Mountains, and then I headed out west. Now, the first thing I saw up there was what kept me from going to Rocky Mountain National Park, because my plan was also to do some photography and videography for some other projects. It was smoked out. And when it's smoked out, not only is it bad for photography and videography, but it's also bad for hiking, it's bad for camping, and it's really just not a pleasant experience. I've been through enough of that, so I continued on. I went down into Utah, and part of that trip, and I love Utah, man, if you want to go to Mars, you don't have to take Musk's space shot to get there. You can just go into southern Utah, you'll pretty much be on Mars. And down there what I saw, again, shocking, was Lake Powell. I went to an overlook on Lake Powell, and I looked down, and where normally you would see lake, the Colorado River was flowing through in a very kind of narrow band compared to what you usually see. And the sign they had a problem there, a sure sign, was the boat ramps were all well short of the historic water's edge. I mean, that's just sad, and that's what we're seeing out there now. In fact, the last time I went there, the water, and this was in 2017, the water was up where the boat ramps were. So it doesn't take much to have this level of a problem. And they say that if this drought doesn't break in the Southwest, that probably within 2 years, Lake Powell will not even have enough water to generate electricity. And that's its historic purpose. Well, I mean, to get water, to hold water for agriculture and cities and towns, but part of it was also to provide power to the Southwest. So this was very shocking to me. Then what I did is from Utah I continued up north and I went around Great Basin National Park, and then I headed west. And I headed west to the Eastern Sierra. Now, the Eastern Sierra was as beautiful as ever. I mean, unfortunately, Mono Lake is way down, as it has been since Los Angeles started drinking the springs, and it never recovered from that. They're trying, but it hasn't recovered from that. But what a beautiful spot. So even though this trip is about climate change, there were areas that were quite beautiful. Unfortunately, I couldn't get up into Yosemite easily because of COVID-19. They had reservations and all this going on, and quite frankly, I didn't want anything to do with it. So my next stop after the Eastern Sierra was to head over. I wanted to see what the coast of California looked like with sea level rise. And one of the hot spots on that coast, as far as sea level rise causing a problem, is Pacifica. Pacifica is just south of San Francisco, and it has a reputation for its bluffs getting eaten away and houses falling in the water. Now, I did not see any houses fall in the water, but I saw houses dangerously close to the edge. So I can see why Pacifica is being very proactive about dealing with sea level rise, as other communities are along that coast. Now, from Pacifica, I headed north to Lassen Peak. It's just beautiful up there. Now, this is the area, however, where I experienced or could see wildfire smoke. I've actually driven through controlled burns, so I know what those wildfires can do. And you feel the heat, you smell the smoke, and you get through it. I've also hiked near wildfires. I was up at Cedar Point in Utah a few years ago, and this is what I saw. And I actually did hike closer to it, and then I was like, I'm out of here. These things are unpredictable. You think that you're a peak over from it, you're not. It's a lot closer than it is. So don't go near the wildfires. Let the firefighters do their jobs. Now, when I was up in Lassen National Park, Lassen Volcanic National Park, I did notice that when I was there in 2017, that literally you could not climb Lassen Peak, the main volcano in the Cascade Range, the most southern volcano in the Cascade Range, because it was covered in snow. This year, in July, the snow was practically gone. It was beautiful up there, but the snow was practically gone. Now, while I was up on Lassen Peak, I did notice certainly that it was a lot warmer than normal, but I could see Mount Shasta at a distance. And Mount Shasta is stunningly beautiful when it's covered with snow. This year, I drove over expecting it to look like it did in 2017, and every other time I've seen it going back many decades. It usually has this nice cap of snow. It's just a classic-looking Cascade Mountain. This year, a lot of the snow was gone, as you can see, and there were fires burning on the northeast flank as I rounded the mountain. And I was like, I can't stop here and camp. What a bummer. And I really feel for the people who live there, because it could not have been good for their tourism industry. Because normally people do go up on the mountain, they do camp, they do hike, but it just, I gotta be honest with you, it didn't have the allure. So I continued on from Shasta, kept going north on I-5, and then I saw a real shocker. I saw the Lake Shasta reservoir down under half, probably at around 40%. And when I was going over on the I-5 bridge, the color from it, from the banks that are normally covered in crystal clear water, blue water, absolutely beautiful. The banks were this orange, red, and yellow that absolutely, I mean, it was blinding. So I had to stop, of course. I had to get a look, even though, I gotta be honest, it broke my heart. But I pulled off of I-5, I flew my drone, and this is what you get. Yeah. And I also walked. I found a spot where I could walk and see what's the distance between the boat ramps and the lake. substantial. So they're in crisis up there. And I met people. It's not just this guy from Florida and the East Coast imagining it. Now, I've lived in California, so I don't really have that East Coast, West Coast thing. I went to USC, so I know California. And I lived up around Sacramento. I've camped and hiked there for decades. But the people up there were very nervous, and they are very nervous, and they should be. The wildfires were continuing all around all summer with tragic results. I continued north. I went and I was in Oregon, and I was around Bend, Oregon. But to get there, I had to pass the Bootleg Fire, which was not close to the highway, but I could see the whole time, pretty much heading up through Oregon. I could see this just giant, it was either a mushroom-shaped cloud or it had a little anvil to it. But they wouldn't let you in there for good reasons. They had to fight that fire. And it was just something to see. And having been close to these wildfires, I knew what it looked like up close, and I didn't belong there. There's nothing I could do to help. So I continued north, had some great hiking up on Mount St. Helens, and then I went up into Mount Rainier. Now, I was at a campsite between Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier. They're really not that far apart as the crow flies. I did some great hiking up on Mount Rainier. It's absolutely beautiful. It was warmer than it should have been, and there is less snow. You could see there's less snow because they're having those heat waves that are causing a lot of melt. And when that happens, the glaciers underneath, there's glaciers up on these mountains, are exposed to the sunlight and the heat, and they melt even more rapidly. And another thing that people need to understand is even the wildfires can cause problems in other areas. The soot from the wildfires can land on snowpack hundreds of miles away, and that dark soot can cause even faster melting. So what I'm seeing as I'm taking this trip is I'm seeing what's happening in this country up close and in person. The other thing I did is I went all the way up into the Olympic Peninsula, which is the furthest you can go from Florida in the lower 48. I wanted to go to the furthest point, but I actually couldn't get there because one of the tribes, unfortunately, had to shut down that area to protect themselves from COVID. So they couldn't allow any visitors in. Smart move. I also was able to go, traveling around that area, and in one of the coastal tribal areas that I visited in La Push, Washington, which is on that Olympic Peninsula, stunningly beautiful. You gotta go there, just absolutely beautiful. But they're having erosion issues, and they're actually starting to build infrastructure like an elementary school inland from the beach and the coast, just to protect, because they know as the water comes up with sea level rise, they're going to lose even more land to the sea level rise and Pacific storms. Smart move. They're planning ahead. So after that part, after Washington State, Mount Rainier, all that, I did head back toward the east, and I'm just driving through hundreds and hundreds of miles of smoke. And that smoke is coming from the US, it's coming from Canada, it's choking, it's blinding, it's not pleasant. I actually tried to get out of it and whenever I could. And that's pretty much what I experienced. Now, just to make a point, 4 years ago in 2017, when I went out west, I did a lot of southern Colorado, around Pagosa Springs, and a lot of dead forests out there. I mean, you drive and you're driving through, hundreds of miles of dead forests. And that's due to warming, it's due to bark beetles that are taking advantage of the forest. Some of it is from forestry mismanagement. I have no stake in that game, it's true. Some of it, if they had allowed fires to take away the underbrush, then you wouldn't quite have all these problems to this extent. But the warming is known for releasing the bark beetles from a limited amount of forest to just kind of exploding across it. I've also camped in northern Florida up on the Panhandle and heard bark beetles eating away at pine trees when I tried to sleep. And that was years ago. So this is not picking on any area of the country. This stuff is pretty widespread. Now, some people have argued with me and said, well, you know, global warming is only a problem because the forests were mismanaged. Well, that doesn't explain the water that I'm walking through in South Florida neighborhoods due to sea level rise. Climate change, global warming, sea level rise. It's real. I walk through it. And these are neighborhoods, and it goes right up to the houses. So you can't tell me that it's not real. The other thing is I've seen glaciers that are receding, and that process is speeding up. So I'm just saying that if it was just one thing, if wildfires were the only problem, you know, I'd say, well, maybe it is because it was mismanaged. But because you're adding that to stronger storms around the country, you're adding that to sea level rise, you're adding that to glaciers that are receding, which is a problem because a lot of the cities and towns in that area, they rely on that seasonal melt, gradual seasonal melt, for water during the warmer months. So this is not an isolated problem. Now, I'm not trying to do this to just oppress people, because honestly, that's not going to be very helpful. But I am doing this because I think there are steps that we need to take right now to solve this problem. Step one is elect people who believe in climate change and believe we have to address it head on. It's science, it's established science, and also this is something that it's not going to stop. The more we pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the tougher problem we're going to find ourselves in. This isn't something where you suddenly stop producing greenhouse gases and the whole problem goes away. This is like the Titanic. We have already built up speed over the last 100 years, maybe 150 years, of pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The ship has speed. Even if you shut it off tomorrow, there's so much fuel in the air in the form of CO2, which traps the heat from the sun, that it's not going to suddenly stop. This ship keeps going. So we get impacted. We're impacted by it right now. This isn't tomorrow's problem. Your kids, your grandchildren, and their kids, wildlife, cities and towns, we're all going to be impacted by this. It doesn't just stop, but we got to start getting things done now. And again, electing people who believe in climate change, I think that's number one. Number two is buying products from companies that believe in climate change as much as you can. Three, buy the most fuel-efficient car you can possibly buy. I mean, if you don't need a car, ride your bike, take public transit, whatever you can do to lessen the load of carbon dioxide. And number four, own an energy-efficient home. If your home is not energy efficient, have it weatherized. That will save money in the long run and reduce the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. If you own a business, do the same thing. Make sure it's energy efficient and not causing the release of more greenhouse gases, which ultimately is even going to cost you more as a business person. So make sure you do that. Also, if you have lights on in your house, or a computer, or a TV, or a stereo, or any other electronic item that you're not using, switch it off. It worked in the 70s, it'll work now. Let's stop the electricity drain. Let's stop it now, and that will help with climate change. The last point I want to make is try to eat as much non-meat, vegetable-based foods as possible. I mean, I've had some of the veggie burgers and even the veggie chicken. They make a great sandwich. You know, they're in patty form, but they make a great sandwich, and you can break them up, put them in spaghetti sauces. Even that has come a long way. In the 1990s, I tried to do that, and I couldn't eat it. And on my step-by-step-chef.com website, soon I'm going to do a lot more vegetable and vegetarian-based meals. I mean, I've tried to punch the vegetables up as much as possible, not only for climate change issues, but also because it's better for you. But I am going to do more of those types of recipes because it's the responsible thing to do. So what I'm telling you is, this is my experience. I went out and I took a look, and it's not good. It's not good for any of us. And I'm an average guy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not your expert, although I've done a lot of reading, and I wrote a book called 7 Sea Level Rise Real Estate Questions based on my research. I do have a journalism background. So I'm just saying that I'm just an average person. I want to make a difference. I don't want to depress people to the point where they don't try to make a difference. I think we can make a difference, but we got to do it right now. And I hope you'll join me.